I mentioned at the outset of the show, we have a guest joining us today. He's been on the show at least once, I think a couple of times, and I'm very excited that he's joining us today by phone. This is Dr. Everett Piper. And if any of you don't recognize his name, but it's ringing a little bit of a bell, you may remember him as the author of first a statement to his then university where he was president, and then book called Not a Daycare. It was a brilliant piece, a brilliant way of making the point when he was president of the Ohio Wesleyan University to students that they didn't come to college to be coddled. They came to college to learn, to engage in the robust debate of ideas, to listen, to be subject to having to listen to ideas, even ones they don't exactly completely agree with. So he really that book and that whole message really resonated with so much of America because they were tired of thinking of college campuses as places where only the outspoken left wing gets to speak and that college students have to be coddled and protected. So Dr. Everett Piper was the president of Oklahoma Wesleyan for 17 years. He has retired from Oklahoma Wesleyan. He has a great website, dreverettpiper.com, dreverettpiper.com. And he continues to be out in the public arena in the American political conversation. He's a columnist for the Washington Times. The reason I want him to join us today is to talk about a column I think many of our readers listened to or read and talked about, which was a column in Christianity Today, a Christian magazine calling for the removal of President Trump. And so we're going to talk about the column, talk about Dr. Piper's response, and just talk generally about the idea of what is it, the kind of heart and soul Christian American, how to think about where we are in America with President Trump doing so much good for conservatives in this country, but on the other hand, engaging occasionally in some conduct some people find troublesome. So I believe we have Dr. Everett Piper on the phone. Dr. Piper?
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm always honored.
Love to have you. Thank you so very much. And again, thank you for that great column and book about This Is Not a Daycare. But I want to just jump right in. I told our listeners before you came on, there was obviously a great deal of angst in America when there was the editor-in-chief, Mark Galli of Christianity Today, published an editorial in that magazine captioned, "Trump should be removed from office." And he's making reference to the impeachment, which we all are aware. We were just talking about a moment ago, but he's even broader than that. He is kind of saying, or how I read it, he's kind of saying this president just is not a moral guy. Look at all the bad things he's done in his life. He should be removed. So I want to just start with Dr. Piper. You wrote in the Washington Times your column, which, by the way, for our listeners, the columns we're talking about are available for you to read at my website, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage, under shows, drop down list of links. You can see these articles and read them yourself. But you wrote an article in the Washington Times, your column, Christianity Today versus Donald Trump. I was wrong about Donald Trump, and so is Christianity Today. So to start with, Dr. Piper, early on, when President Trump was in his campaign, you were approached about having him come to the university you were then president of, Oklahoma Wesleyan, and you declined that. So why at that time did you turn down the opportunity to invite candidate and then President Trump to Oklahoma Wesleyan?
Well, at the front end of the campaign, during the primaries, I was opposed to Donald Trump. I said that I would not have a man on my campus, a Christian campus, a man that owned casinos with strip clubs in those casinos, a man that had been pro-choice and proud of it, a man who boasted of his infidelities in his books, et cetera, et cetera. I said, this is not a man that represents the Christian worldview, the Christian behavior of Oklahoma Wesleyan University. I will not have him on my campus, and I will not vote for him. Now, fast forward. Since that time, he has become president. And since that time, he has been proven to be pro-choice. Since that time, he has defended my religious freedom and yours. Since that time, he has appointed constitutionalists as judges across the federal judiciary as well as the Supreme Court. What I'm saying today is that just because Donald Trump has a checkered past, and he does, And just because Donald Trump used to support positions that I think are unbiblical, such as abortion, which he no longer supports, and just because he has questionable phone calls that are ambiguous to foreign leaders and acerbic tweets, does not mean that Christians should step away from him and vote against him. In fact, I think we're obligated to stand with the man in the same way that fourth century Christians stood with Constantine. Constantine was a bad man. Constantine was educated in the courts of Diocletian, who executed Christians for recreation. Constantine, even after he made Christianity legal in the Roman Empire, was guilty of some very nefarious behavior, which included the suspected execution of his own relatives. So here's my point. Should we be thankful for Constantine because he released the church to do its good work? Absolutely. Even though Constantine had questionable things in his past and maybe even in his present, God used him providentially to release the church to do its good work. And women were elevated, and children were given rights and dignity. The church was released to be the salt and light to a culture that was dying, a culture that was dark, and a culture that was corrupt. I'm grateful for Constantine, and I'm grateful for Donald Trump. Mark Galli was wrong in penning his article. I was wrong when I stood against Donald Trump. There are things that are more important than ambiguous phone calls and acerbic tweets.
Well, you have to know, actually, I don't know how often you're able to listen to my show, but you have to know I'm right with you. I will say I think the time to question any candidate's past, their behavior, their beliefs is during a campaign, and especially during a primary, where if you know that you basically stand with the conservative side on politics and issues of religion and faith and politics, you need to look at the spectrum of possible candidates, and that is a time to assess them and perhaps to think a particular person's past may make you uncomfortable with them, and somebody else's past who's in the ballpark of your beliefs seems to be more like what you believe in. So, but once you're, it's a funny thing. If Galli's Galli's editorial had appeared, early on in the 2016 primary, and you had other people you could consider, but what Galli was doing, or the Christianity Today was taking the position was, after he's been elected, all that he's done, he still should be attacked and removed for things that we've known about him for a long time. I mean, I think there's just a right place in Christianity to really closely vet people as your leaders. But then once they're in, as President Trump is, you have to look at what they're doing as a leader now. Does that argument resonate with you?
Yes, and I also learned something else from Os Guinness. During the primary season in 2016, I was privileged to be studying at the Oxford Center for Christian Apologetics in Oxford, England. And Os Guinness, one of our foremost apologists of our day, a C.S. Lewis of our time, was one of my professors. It was right after the Brexit vote. I was in class very early that morning, and I had the privilege of being there alone with Os, having a cup of coffee with my hero. And I asked him, "What do you think about Brexit?" He said, "I can't vote in England any longer. I've been in the United States too long. But if I could, I would have voted to leave." Well, I was stunned because Oz is white collar. Oz is educated. Oz is the intellectual of intellectuals. And it was the intellectuals and the elite, the white collar, that wanted to remain with the European Union. And it was the blue collar, the working class, that wanted to leave. But Oz was saying he would have voted to leave. And I said, "Oz, why?" And here's the point I bring this story up. He said to me, "Everett, we've talked about this. If you want freedom, always vote for the covenant. Never vote for the hierarchy." He said the European Union, France, and Belgium are hierarchical. It's top-down, elites telling everybody else how to live. The Magna Carta and the United States Constitution are covenantal. It's bottom-up, individual freedom and personal responsibility. If you want freedom, always vote for the covenant, not the hierarchy. The Democratic platform is hierarchical. The Republican platform is covenantal. We don't vote for a king in the United States. We vote for an idea, and the idea is the Constitution, the covenant.
I love that. I love that point. Thank you. That's just a great analogy, a great point. And well, we talk about in the show many times Brexit. It was kind of the real heart and soul, salt of the earth, basic citizens of England that said, yeah, we don't want to be part of European Union anymore. But back to Christianity today. One more point I want to get at is I think that some people during the primary chose other candidates to support, but more and more Christians came on board slowly for the Trump campaign during the primary. And then during his presidency, even more so, you see more Christian leaders coming behind him. And it is precisely for the reasons you said, because they see a president who is actually standing up for the pro-life cause in real ways, in meaningful ways, not just talk, and standing up for the protection of religious liberty. And, I have a sense, I'm curious if you share it, I have a sense that President Trump, first of all, no candidate or president's ever been perfect, but I do believe President Trump is not just listening to some of his supporters. I have a sense he's slowly embracing the importance of the Judeo-Christian founding or basis of America. He's starting to recognize the importance of that Christian ethos in what created America. That may be a bridge too far for you, but what do you think?
Well, I agree with you. I don't know whether the man has had a conversion experience or not. I don't know if he has claimed that he's now born again. I won't make that claim for him. I'll let him do that. But what I do know is this. Under the Obama administration, I had to sue the Obama Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services because they were forcing me to provide transgender accommodations on my campus. And I said, no, it won't happen. They were forcing me to include abortifacient drugs in our healthcare package. And I said, no, we won't do that. I had to sue those two organizations under Obama. Now, here's the interesting thing. When Trump took over, I was invited to Washington, D.C. to speak at a ceremony where his Department of Health and Human Services and Department of Education was launching a new division of religious freedom, and I was there to speak on its behalf. I took the podium and I said, man, is it good to be here thanking you rather than suing you.
Very, very good. I love that. And actually, I had read about that and I forgot about that. Yeah, just the idea of having a division related to religious freedom is such a signal to America that we're re-embracing this idea. We're re-engaging with the notion that religious freedom it's our first freedom in the First Amendment, and it is a foundational idea to preserving America's culture and our future, our very future as a country. I want to turn, I love getting to talk with you, and we could probably talk much more about Christianity today. And I want to know if there are any other points you want to make about to refute or respond to the Christianity Today piece about removing President Trump, about how, and this is really kind of how Christians are supposed to square the idea of a man whose life has been lived imperfectly and broadcast living that imperfection with choosing him to be our leader. And I want to get at the idea that in part, you have to recognize in politics, the reality is you're only going to have two choices for president. You're going to have two paths forward for America. And I think a legitimate consideration for Christians is to recognize which path is this particular party on, political party, versus the other political party, leaving aside the character of the individual who serves as president. Do you think that's valid?
Democratic Party that believes in aborting children, in other words, terminating children, killing children up to the point of birth. And in some cases, they even argue for post-birth abortion. We can vote for a party that does not believe in religious freedom, believes you and I should have our voices silenced. You can vote for a party that believes that women are not biological facts, but fabrications and fantasies of dysphoric men who want to play dress up and make believe. You can vote for a party that wants to take your right as a woman away from having your own bathroom and your own sport and your own scholarship at the collegiate level. We can vote for this party that seems to be more interested in mourning the loss of Soleimani than hoping for the victory of the United States and Donald Trump. We can vote for that party, which I would argue is a party of hierarchical elitism and arrogance, or we can vote for a party that believes in the constitutional freedoms and the self-evident truths that have been endowed to us by our Creator. It doesn't matter who the king, quote unquote, is. What matters is the ideas of the government structure that gives you more freedom, and there's no question which one it is.
Dr. Piper, that was so well said. I think after we're finished, I'm gonna transcribe. That was a perfect summary. I want to turn to one other topic today, because we're so glad to have you on the show today on America Can We Talk. You wrote a column in Washington Times responding to the very, very famous Hollywood producer, filmmaker, actor Ron Howard, who tweeted out on January, or I don't know if he tweeted or just made a statement on January 1st, about the idea that President Trump, referring to President Trump as morally bankrupt and as a human being, and that he is hustling the American people. You wrote a great column in the Washington Times responding to this sudden explosion of concern about morality out of Hollywood and Ron Howard. I'd love to have you just tell our listeners your response to Ron Howard attacking President Trump as morally bankrupt and as a person who's hustling the American people.
Well, I'm grateful that Ron Howard and Hollywood all of a sudden care about morality, and I say that with a little bit of a smirk on my face. I mean, this is the club. This is the group of elites who have mocked us. They've maligned us. They've told us that it doesn't matter what you believe as long as it works for you, quote unquote. They've suggested that the rubes and the stupid folks in Heartland America are trying to cling to our God and our guns. They've exposed themselves on their red carpets, but yet they claim to be against the subjugation of women. They claim to care about children at the southern border with Mexico, but they execute children in their Planned Parenthood clinics across the nation, and they celebrate it. I could go on and on. The hypocrisy of Hollywood to turn around and start lecturing you and me about morality, please. They've sold us the snake oil of sin in their movies and in their entertainment for decades, and now they're going to turn around and try to sell us morality in their traveling medicine show. There are millions of us across the country that could care less what Ron Howard and Hollywood thinks about morality, and frankly, they can take their sideshow and their circus and they can go elsewhere.
Dr. Piper, I cannot thank you enough. First of all, I will talk quickly for our listeners. One of my happy listeners sent me a text message saying I misstated the name of your university where you're president. Sorry, it's Oklahoma Wesleyan. I believe I said in other states, Oklahoma Wesleyan, where you were president. You now are active in writing. And I want to tell if our listeners want to read more of the things that you write, and I'm telling you folks, you do want to read more of the things that Dr. Everett Piper writes in his Washington Times column. Tell people how they can find you.
My Twitter handle is Dr. Everett Piper. That's DREVERETTPIPER. And you cited my website at the beginning of the show. I'll repeat it. It's dreverettpiper.com. You can find my columns there, or you can go directly to the Washington Times. And please, if you're interested in me speaking at any of your events, whether it be political or church or a retreat or whatnot, I try to make myself as affordable as your budget can provide. So you can contact me on the website for that.
Dr. Piper, thank you so very much for taking time to join us today. In America Can We Talk? It was great talking with you.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, folks, I will tell you, by the way, that Dr. Piper, we are based in Dallas, Texas. I have invited Dr. Piper to Texas at least once. I think twice he came and spoke to different groups. If you think he was engaging in that 10 or 15-minute interview, you can't believe how great he is in person speaking. He is engaging. He is really able to lay out the argument on so many issues about where we are as a country, what the issues, how important the issues are that we face, how we repair or fix our country, what we need to do to bring back our country's, dedication to the principles on which we were founded. He's extraordinary, fun to talk to. I encourage you to invite him as a speaker, as I have in Texas. And again, it was Dr. Everett Piper. And I hope you all will enjoy that interview. And I urge you to follow him. He's just a great thinker.